This is Chapter 5 of Taming Your Mind, or How to Develop Your Thinking Ability. It's about tool number 2, up to a point, and the subtitle is Think in Terms of Degrees. And it starts with a pretty long quote, but I'm going to go ahead and read it because it kind of ties into the original creation of general semantics in World War I, and is from Kenneth Roberts. All the great villains and small villains whom I met so frequently were consistent men, unimaginative men who consistently believed in war as a means of settling disputes between nations. Equally misguided men who consistently believed that war must be avoided at all hazards, no matter what the provocation. Narrow men who consistently upheld the beliefs and acts of one political party and saw no good in any other. Short-sighted men who consistently refused to see that the welfare of their own nation was dependent upon the welfare of every other nation. Ignorant men who consistently thought that the policies of their own government should be supported and followed, whether these policies were right or wrong. Dangerous men who consistently thought that all people with black skins are inferior to those with white skins. Intolerant men who consistently believed that all people with white skins should be forced to accept all people with black skins as equals. And I know that any nation that cannot or will not avoid the dreadful pitfalls of consistency will be one with the dead empires. And that's from Lydia Bailey by Kenneth Roberts, copyright 1947. And let's get started with the actual text. We live in a complicated world that requires careful mapping. We can talk about good things and bad things, black things and white things, true things and false things, beautiful things and ugly things, efficient and inefficient things. But where can we find things that are in every way as we have described them? It is, for example, easy to label people or things as good and bad, but most of the time, a little bad comes packaged in with the good, and a little good with the bad. In other words, things are not usually completely good or completely bad. Few things, however good, are without some disadvantages, and almost nothing, however bad, is without a trace of good. Scientists tell us that nothing in this world is pure black or pure white. If something were pure black, it would absorb all the light that falls on it. All things, even lampblack, are known to reflect a small amount of light. If something were pure white, it would reflect 100% of the light falling on it. No object has been found that reflects all the light that strikes it. It is convenient to refer to things as being either poisonous or non-poisonous. However, there is nothing so poisonous but that a small amount can be taken without harm, and there is nothing so non-poisonous that a huge amount can be imbibed safely. Some of the most gruesome skulls and crossbones appear on iodine bottles, but a small amount of this poisonous iodine will not hurt anybody. For certain mouth conditions, Some dentists prescribe painting the gums with iodine. Water is regarded as non-poisonous, but the foremen of the torture chambers in the Middle Ages found that 5 quarts of water poured into the stomach of a human being made an excellent poison for their purposes, reliable in action, very painful, and not too fast or too slow. Anything can be poisonous if you absorb enough. Nothing is poisonous if you take a sufficiently small quantity. We're going to take a little pause for some non-poisonous water. It's got to be this or that. All of us have picked up either or and all or none habits of thinking. We like to think of things as completely this way or completely that way. We seem to rebel against middle positions. The Saturday Evening Post ran an article, "Can We Reform Our Bureaucrats?" that tried to present adequate verbal maps describing the way government offices are run. Many readers had trouble understanding the article. One person wrote to the editor, "Whose side are you on? You knock the bureaucrats, then you say they are swell. You say bureaus are overstaffed. You say bureaus are understaffed." The answer of the editor was to the point. It would be easier to paint the picture all black or all white, but big issues are seldom that simple. We prefer balanced, well-rounded reports. People with either-or habits of thinking tend to insist that verbal maps be drawn such that either all government officials be regarded as efficient or no government officials be regarded as efficient. But unfortunately, we live in a world that is generally too complex to be adequately covered by an either-or or an all-or-none verbal map. We live in a world where different individuals and organizations can show an infinite number of variations between efficiency and inefficiency. 2 kinds of people. Someone with a twinkle in his eye once said, "There are 2 kinds of people in the world. Those who always divide the people of the world into 2 kinds, and those who don't." We live in a world of great diversity. For example, people do not come in 2 varieties, either good-looking or ugly. If we lined up a large group of people and arranged them according to degrees of homeliness and comeliness, we would have at one end of the line those who were alleged to break a mirror at one glance. Next to them would be found those who were regarded as just plain ugly. Then the ones we would call unattractive, then so-so, then pretty, then wow. We can't just fold humanity down the middle like a sheet of paper and have all the handsome ones on one side and those we call ugly on the other. Even those we call ugly may not be completely lacking in points of beauty, and vice versa. Katisha, a designing woman in Gilbert and Sullivan's Mikado, realized that her face was not attractive, but she points out that people come from miles around to view her beautiful left shoulder blade, and, according to her, she has a right elbow with a fascination that few can resist. Actor Wallace Beery, in commenting upon the way parts in the movies are often made too either-orish, said, "Most screen characters are either very good or very bad, a fact that often disturbs an actor as much as it does an intelligent observer. For no man is completely made from one piece of cloth, all good or all bad, all cruel or all tender. Instead, each person is a mixture of many things. A sport or a tightwad. When in New York, Arthur Brisbane, a well-known news commentator who died a millionaire, would dine at places like Delmonico's, the Hoffman House, and Diddy Moore's, where he tipped lavishly. In other words, he was a sport and a spender at these places. But Stanley Walker, who knew Brisbane well, tells us that occasionally Brisbane would drop into an inexpensive restaurant for a quick meal and leave an infuriated waitress picking up a nickel tip. Now, what was Arthur Brisbane? Was he a sport or was he a tightwad? No answer to this question is possible so long as we insist upon thinking in either-or terms. The life facts do not fit the either-or pattern, and the verbal maps we use to represent those life facts must not fit it either. In some situations, at some times and places, Brisbane could be called a sport. At other times and places, he could be called a tightwad. Up to a point, he can be called both a sport and a tightwad. Up to a point. The tool that will help us make adequate maps in a world where most things are not pure black or pure white is the phrase, up to a point. Frequently, we torment ourselves with questions that cannot be answered in all or none terms. For instance, here are some questions that can be answered only by a degree analysis. And the title of the table has question and answer. And the answer is always up to a point, but I'll go ahead and read them here. Am I a success? Up to a point. Am I a failure? Up to a point. Am I superior to other people? Up to a point. Am I inferior to other people? Up to a point. Is Mary good looking? Up to a point. Are politicians honest? Up to a point. Will Blotto shampoo remove dandruff? Up to a point. Will the rules for thinking in this book help me solve my problems? Up to a point. There are several phrases we frequently use when we think in terms of degrees. We can say, to some extent, my car runs better when I change spark plugs, or the weather has affected my petunias to quite a degree. Whatever phrase we use in our verbal maps, the important thing is to put a mental red flag on a red flag on either or and all or none statements. That red flag means possibly dangerous. Survey the territory carefully. Begin spotting every either-or statement you hear or find yourself making. Consider the problem from many points of view. You will gain remarkable insight into your life situations when you overcome an either-or attitude that may now be blocking your thought. And we're going to pause before the next section. Either a man or a woman. But you may ask, Aren't there some things that are adequately represented by an either-or verbal map? For instance, aren't people either men or women? Isn't this an either-or, all-or-none matter? Scientists who have made careful studies along this line tell us that it is even useful to think in terms of degrees here. A few things in this world are adequately mapped by either-or maps, but this is not one of them. A 100% he-man and 100% woman do not exist. Women have glands that produce male hormones, and men have glands that produce female hormones. And on the average, women excrete 70% as many male hormones as men. And men excrete on the average 40% as many female hormones as women. As Roger J. Williams pointed out, any man who boasts that he is a 100% he-man must, in order to substantiate his claim, bear a chest which is adorned with no telltale features and submit a sample of urine which contains no female sex hormones. That's from The Human Frontier by Roger Williams, copyright 1946. Once a 40-year-old man with a normal sex life, he was married and had 2 sons, developed a tumor in his adrenal glands. The change in his glands caused by the tumor gradually made him more and more feminine. His breasts underwent development and his sex organs decreased in size. His sex desire and potency disappeared, and he tended to lose his body hair. When the tumor was successfully removed by an operation, he lost the feminine characteristics and became a normal male again. Most of the time, nature manages to give us genital organs that are either male or female, but every now and then she really mixes things up. There are records of about 50 hermaphrodites, individuals with a complete set of both male and female organs. So even such a thing as maleness and femaleness is not an either-or matter. Please note that I am not saying that either-or maps never represent life facts, but I am saying that in our daily life, we tend to use either-or pattern of thinking carelessly, and that many times we assume that things are either-or when careful thinking would reveal other possibilities. The in-betweens. Most of the time, nature presents to us a continuous scale that shows no definite break between opposite ends. We do not have 2 kinds of weather, hot or cold. We do not even have 3 kinds of weather, hot, comfortable, and cold. During the period of a year, the temperature will range from uncomfortably hot to uncomfortably cold, and it does not skip a single degree. There may be more of some temperatures than others, but we will find all degrees between the extremes. When people do not think in terms of degrees, they make verbal maps that violently distort the territory. Tom Brown says, all politicians are crooked. A careful study will reveal that various politicians range from exceedingly honest to exceedingly dishonest. A verbal map like Tom's is quite inadequate because it represents only the lower part of the scale. Dick Green is not as naive as Tom. Dick says, politicians are either honest or dishonest. This verbal map represents the territory better, but it still misses the middle part of the scale. Harry Black has a 3-valued approach. He says, politicians are either honest or dishonest or so-so. This map represents the territory far more adequately than either of the other maps. It is rough, but for practical, everyday purposes, it may be satisfactory. However, it still does not represent the territory as adequately as possible. It implies that politicians come in three brands. Actually, there are as many degrees of honesty as there are politicians. If maps are to represent the territory as adequately as possible, they must reflect the varying degrees to be found in the territory. Women's dresses come in all prices, ranging from very cheap to very expensive. Most of the time, for practical purposes, it is satisfactory to classify dresses as low cost, medium cost, and high cost. Even when it is practical to talk about the two ends and the middle of a scale, we should remember that the territory is not divided in this way, but generally runs smoothly from one extreme to another. For some of our purposes, we need verbal maps that are as precise as we can make them. At other times, we can get along with verbal maps that are only approximate. You alone must be the judge of how important it is that your verbal maps be precise. Different situations need different degrees of precision. For example, pajama manufacturers make three sizes: small, medium, and large, and the men get along all right. We're just turning the page here, folks. Pajamas don't have to fit so well as shirts. Shirts have to be made in over a dozen different neck sizes and sleeve lengths in order to fit the range of men who vary from small to large. And we're going to pause. I should keep the drink closer. Up to what point? In order to find out up to what point the territory is hot or cold, black or white, good or bad, etc., it is necessary for us to observe carefully. Usually, it is not very helpful for us to know that Henry Jones is honest up to a point. We need to know up to what point. What kind of reputation does he have? Is he known to take everything that isn't nailed down? Is he no more honest than the system demands? Can he be trusted in small things? Can he be trusted in large things? Does it seem likely that you can place any amount of confidence and trust in Henry's honesty? As with the other tools for thinking, when we use up to a point, we must consider the facts. In trying to find out up to what point Henry Jones is honest, we would assemble all the data and information we can. We make a so far as I know now decision, and if we are smart, we will keep our minds open for further evidence that we will either confirm or reverse the decision. Henry Jones is a process, and the point he's up to can change from time to time. If the territory is not consistent. Have you noticed when we begin to argue with certain people, they will insist we either agree with them 100% or disagree with them 100%. It annoys them for us to agree partly or disagree partly. They want to maintain that he who is not with them 100% is against them, all or none. We must have patience with those who would push us toward an extreme position. If we fall into their trap, we will be making verbal maps that do not adequately represent the territory, and they will have no trouble making us appear foolish. We must stand our own ground and not be intimidated. We must explain that it is not our fault that things are not all black or all white. We must make our maps represent the territory as we see it. Remember, the narrower the mind, the broader the statement. Most of the time, maps are more adequate if they say many or most instead of all, usually instead of always, seldom instead of never, similar instead of same. When someone insists that it has got to be this or that, ask him how he knows. Unfortunately, truth does not usually do a very thorough job of organizing herself along either-or lines. If we're going to follow truth wherever she may lead, we have to get over our habits of guiding her into an either-or corral. Beware of selected examples. It is easy to select convincing examples implying that all government bureaus are inefficient, all businessmen are greedy, woman is fickle, man is evil, the stars control our destinies, or the end justifies the means. An example proves only that some of the things in question work that way. The problem before the careful thinker is, up to what point does the entire group act that way? It is only by way of making account of unselected examples that we can ever find up to what point a generalization adequately represents the territory. No amount of selected examples, however convincing, can be relied upon. Only by checking things as they run, that is, by random sampling, can we free ourselves from the persistent tendency to select things that prove our point and to ignore things on the other side. The astrologers claim that people born under the sign of Libra should have musical talent. One person who tried to find out up to what point this map represents their territory checked the birthdays of 1498 musicians. According to his figures, fewer are born under Libra than under any sign except Scorpio. Once you get used to looking for ways to rate the up-to-a-pointness of your verbal maps, you will be able to think of many clever ways to test them that have not occurred to you, or perhaps to anyone else before. People who make accurate counts of random samples to find out up to what point their verbal maps represent the territory add to the world's store of useful knowledge. Those who insist on proving their point by beautifully selected examples simply perpetuate their own varieties of misinformation and nonsense. The thousands of hours they spend during their lifetime thinking and reasoning about things will not leave them or anyone else any wiser. The people who keep quiet for a while and systematically check things are the ones who do their part to increase the amount of reliable knowledge in circulation. Another pause. The last straw. Life is a matter of making wise choices, of knowing when to draw the line. Professor Thorndike pointed out if you put a frog in a pan of cold water and then gradually raise the temperature degree by degree, you can cook him to death and he will not be aroused enough to jump out of the pan. In like manner, people who are not vigilant can be deprived of their liberty or anything else they value without knowing what is going on. We must not be deceived by the degree nature of things. There's a certain point at which a large number of small changes add up to an important difference without any break or jump. The hair on a man's chin doesn't jump out all of a sudden. It grows slowly and quietly, and there is no definite point at which the complexion suddenly changes from a skin you like to touch to a rough beard. But that doesn't keep us from drawing the razor when we realize that our beard has grown beyond the point we think proper. In preparing adequate verbal maps, then, we must bear in mind there is usually no sharp line that divides opposites. No one is 100% sane or insane, or to use a general semantics term, unsane. I just put that note in here. Intelligent or unintelligent, good or bad, black or white, efficient or inefficient, beautiful or ugly, chic or sloppy, musical or non-musical, fast or slow, quick-tempered or calm. But just because there is no sharp line between a heavy load and a light load, we must not assume there's no difference. We must not be like the man who loaded his camel one straw at a time, hoping the additional weight of a single straw would never break its back. If we are to make maps that adequately represent the territory, we must, 1, look for the degree nature of things, 2, hunt for the point at which a little more may make more than a little difference. We must be aware that there is a point at which a single extra straw may make more difference than the thousands of straws that have gone before. Only people who are in the habit of thinking in terms of degrees and who try to find up to what point a map fits the territory will be really at home in this world. For others, there will be more things to raise their blood pressure than are really necessary. Expecting to find all or none, they have a tough time reconciling themselves to a degree world stocked mainly with more or less. To sum up, we live in a subtle world in which things usually are not pure black or pure white. If our maps are to represent things adequately, we cannot make them either completely black or completely white. The tool, up to a point, will remind us that things vary from none to all, and that we must stop, look, and listen to become familiar enough with the territory to make an adequate verbal map that has predictability. And that's the end of chapter 5. Think in terms of degrees, up to a point. And that's Taming Your Mind, copyright 1975 by Ken Keyes Jr. And it's also How to Develop Your Thinking Ability, copyright 1950, written by Ken Keyes Jr., but I guess that's a copyright that was owned by the previous publisher. The next one is Chapter 6, Tool number 3, To Me, subtitled Look Who's Talking. And there's a lot of things to comment on in this chapter. I think too many to go into here, and in terms of my own being ready to do so, there were a lot of things that were interesting and where I thought things could be updated with better examples and perhaps not such distracting examples as men and women, but it may actually be a good example. And just for completeness here, there are 7 cartoons in the section. I think I'll describe them separately or maybe put them in a video with higher production values than this. The making a survey of the territory by random example is an interesting science point in terms of designing experiments. I thought the fact that he assigns a feminine gender to nature and truth when he talks about truth and what she does and things like that was interesting. I don't know if I really have any beneficial comments about it. And let's see, this entire series and episode of the YouTube channel is copyright me and the Tuna Genome Project 2022 and is licensed under a Creative Commons share alike and attribution license. I believe that was a good statement for an audio presentation. Let's also put the link to the text of Science and Sanity up, because I had the link to the 6 tools for thinking going all during the chapter. And I think anything else I'll put into a separate video. So this is the end of the Chapter 5 video on 9/30/2022 at 3:58 p.m. Thank you for listening, and of course, subscribe and press the notification bell if you want to be notified, and bye for now.